Guys, I absolutely hate following rumor mill stories. I absolutely hate it. But this one isn't going anywhere in the media. I got to address it. We know there's no guarantee. There's no guarantee the Bears are keeping their head coach. I stand the side of continuity, which I've been very clear about. There are concrete reasons to do so. I also don't think they'll just fire him and just scramble for a solution. But there's beginning to be some smoke signals that Steelers head coach Mike Tomlin may part ways with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm seeing this from multiple sources, and it's over the last week, it's growing huge legs. One being Mike Florio on Pro Football Talk. Let's hear what he has to say.
50 years of following football. I've lived in and around Pittsburgh. And I always kind of have a sense of where the wind's blowing. And for the first time since Mike Tomlin became the head coach, I feel like the wind is blowing toward a separation. And I think it will be Tomlin leaving, not the Steelers firing him. I felt it with Cowher in 2006. It helped that Jerome Bettis, in his first appearance with NBC, said Cowher's out after this year, which he ended up being 100% right. I feel like Tomlin, whether it's somebody calls from another team and tries to work a trade, whether it's a mutual parting, they don't fire people in Pittsburgh. They would not fire him. But it's starting to feel like it's time for both sides to just go their separate ways. It really is starting to feel like.
Okay. Thank you for that. So what are we talking about here? If GM Ryan Poles and team president Warren, if they're a bit flexible in their decision, the balance might be swung if a replacement option comes up that they simply can't say no to. My meaning, the Bears aren't going to change just because of public opinion or just because of frustration. They'll only make the change if there's a clear and almost foolproof upgrade, and Mike Tomlin fits that. He fits that to the T. Look at the Steelers. The Steelers are not doing well. He's been there for 16 years, I believe. Reports are that the players are starting to not respond to him anymore. Sometimes we need a new voice. That happens on teams. Fans are even beginning to want him out. Where there's smoke, there's usually fire. The Bears as a prime location, that's being bandied about as a huge talking point. It's beginning to be a narrative. It's beginning to be picked up. That and the fact that there's not a more attractive head coaching job than the one that we have here. If this comes up for grabs, we can probably name our candidate. If you aren't convinced this is a possibility, watch Ben Roethlisberger's show. He has a lot to say in this area. And let me get to the story here. This is from ESPN. Roethlisberger is saying maybe the tradition of the Pittsburgh Steelers is done. He's now openly criticizing the team. He's also specifically calling out Mike Tomlin following back-to-back losses against 2-10 teams. This has never happened before. But here's the most telling quote. This is the most telling quote about a poor locker room situation and possibly a coach that has lost his players. Roethlisberger says, "Look, who's grabbing someone by the face mask and saying, that's not what we do." He's talking about Deontay Johnson and George Pickens kind of acting out. Is this happening? Yes, you guys have on defense. Yes, you have guys on defense doing it, but you need guys on the other side of the ball doing it. You need someone to stand up in that room on offense and be like, hey, this isn't what it means to wear the black and gold. That is just very telling in my book. And now if we also look at this from a different perspective, I think this sounds very similar to the talk that led to Andy Reid exiting Philadelphia for Kansas City. If you remember, he had 5 NFC championships. He had a Super Bowl, but things went south after 4-12 year. A lot of things that are happening here in Pittsburgh. Philly thought things had gotten stale. Players weren't buying into it anymore, and Andy moved on. We all know how that happened. We all know what happened next in Kansas City. A lot of good things. And what I'm saying here, this isn't a full expose that Mike Tomlin's leaving. But before this, the thought, even a suggestion of this rumor, it would have been laughable in national media. And the fact that it's happening now, it holds a ton of weight. Let's look at his ties to Hallis Hall outside of his resume. His resume speaks for itself, but let's look to his ties with the Bears. We all know George McCaskey. He has a big-time connection with the Steelers. His family has deep ties with the Rooneys going all the way back to when Papa Bear was alive. I think that's common knowledge, but it's worth pointing out. Our team president, Warren, he has direct ties and a good relationship with him. Warren was in the Vikings front office when Tomlin was the defensive coordinator. I think that was back in 2006. Tomlin is definitely in the legendary Rolodex of Warren that we hear so much about. He has access to his number, obviously. He might just dial his old friend up and be like, dude, are you happy? Tomlin, his resume. 10 playoff appearances, 7 division titles, a Super Bowl, a history of consistent winning over 16 years. If he's available, we need to do everything in our power to get him into town. That's the narrative. This would be a way better get than Harbaugh, too. I personally believe that. Our GM is also rumored, just like every new GM, just like every new team president, that he wants to bring in his own people. Insiders hint at it. We just don't know if the head coach is a part of that. If the evaluation process is over, it looks like the Bears would make a very serious run for Mike Tomlin. But there's one thing standing in the way, and this is kind of what it hinges on, in my opinion: the cost of what it might take. The cost of what it might take to get him into town if he doesn't just leave the Steelers outright and they give him the blessing to do so. I think the Steelers are smart. They're probably not going to allow that. This would possibly be a coach we would have to trade for. And Diana Rossi of The Athletic has an excellent article on this. Let me get to it. Here we go. Thank you for your patience. She says Mike Tomlin's contract expires in 2024. And it's well known the Steelers organization won't engage in extension talks with players or coaches during the season. It just doesn't happen. That's why it's just a rumor mill story right now that's getting legs. She says recently, so we wait and see. There's been chatter that perhaps the Steelers would consider trading Tomlin to Washington, Chicago, or even Carolina to get back some picks. I cannot believe that he would want any part of Carolina. Maybe he loves the challenge. It's not common to give up trades for a coach, but it's also not uncommon. It's happened quite a few times. I'd say the latest of it, you guys know, there's been 8 well-known coaching trades in NFL history, and the most notable and the most successful that happened last season. To release his contract from the New Orleans Saints, you remember the Denver Broncos, they traded a first and a third round pick to acquire Sean Payton. And that worked out very, very well. Denver's now a contending team. I think they've bought into a system. He's a fantastic coach, and that could probably be considered a win. So let's look at our perspective. We can afford to cough these up, right? We can afford to cough up draft capital for Tomlin. We have 21 draft picks over the next 3 seasons. We have 6 in 2024. We have 8 in 2025, and we have 7 in 2026. For Tomlin's services, trading picks to the Steelers is arguably a worthwhile investment. And I think this is likely what it would cost us, a first and a third. But the question is this how we would like to spend our draft capital? Should we do this? I mean, I get it. Fire Getsy, that's fine. But to completely turn away from this staff, to completely turn away and start over, in my opinion, it'd be a huge mistake. A big part of these fourth quarter meltdowns are also young players, as I've talked about previously this week, most notably rookies still growing into the roles. The coaches, they're developing players left and right. And if you watch my previous story this week, I believe the Arizona win is a turning point in player development and a turning point in our franchise and a big predictor of what we're going to be looking at last year. You had this 2023 draft class salting the game away aggressively in the fourth quarter. When that starts happening, when a 5th round pick, I'm talking about Terrell Smith, when a 5th round pick shuts down passes on consecutive plays late in the fourth quarter and with the game on the line, that's showing that the team is responding. That shows that the team is under good coaching. The young guys are gelling with the veterans and forming a winning culture alongside them. In that continuity, I believe that should be the road chosen so we can take the positive momentum into next year. Lance Briggs this morning said this, and this is fantastic. I love him. Great content by Lance Briggs. He says winning the last few games starts a win streak for the next year. Now, how often do we think of that? You stand in the locker room you start the season next year, and you're like, yep, we're on a 2, 3, 4 game win streak. Let's keep it moving, guys. Let's build on this. Now, us as fans, we're usually just talking about meaningless wins at the end of the season. We're talking about, oh, this win stinks. We get a worse draft pick. Guess what? Even with this win, we still have likely the number one. I think we're slated for the number 8 right now. So we have 2 picks within the top 10, and we have so many different directions that we can go. And I can't imagine using this draft capital on a coach. But once a rumor mill story gets legs, I have to address it. And I want to know what you think. Let me know what you think, my friends. I'll see you in the comments. Bear down, and let's be positive. Let's enjoy this Arizona win. Bear down.